seeing it on the screen. And, like anything else, you want the sum of those parts to add up to multiple times more in the value of that story and the way you told it on the screen by the time you're done.
Now, hey, Ron, we got to take a break here in a minute. Rob, I'm going to cut you loose. Again, I think you created, from the trailer at least, I think a very outstanding, good movie. And, that's one thing. The big budget movies, they're losing something nowadays. And I maybe it's my age is playing a big effect, but I kind of like, the indie movies sometimes because I think they tell the story so much better than the big buck, Hollywood movies.
We get a chance to tell the story. That's what it's all about, man.
Yeah, well, I think you did a good job. And Rob, I'm going to cut you off.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you for coming on.
Thank you so
Ron,
much for having me on. Thank you. It was an absolute pleasure.
Okay, and Ron, I don't want you hanging up. I'm going to put you on hold here.
I'm hanging up.
And we're going to do a couple commercials. I'm going to play a little bit of music here for the stations can take a break. Again, when we come back, I'm going to take one or two phone calls where they can ask you a question. They can talk about a little bit about this movie, Dark Relm. We can talk about that. That is a good movie.
Perfect.
And we'll be right back right after this.
Groovy. Thank you very much.
You can advertise your business on Night Dreams Talk Radio, and you will be heard worldwide. Why not contact us at nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com.
If you would like to hear Night Dreams Talk Radio on your local radio station, let them know. Tell them to check out www.nightdreamstalkradio.com, and thank you.
You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, from our compound to you worldwide, with your host, Gary Anderson.
And that is me most of the time. Tonight we got a great guest on. We got Ron Fitzgerald. He is a famous magician in the Dark Realm, horror actor, made a lot of movies, and a very interesting person. Ron, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm with you, Gary. Thank you.
Oh, wow. You know, I like I said, I really would love to see that movie. You know, I hate to say it. Maybe it's like, again, my age, but the movies nowadays are lacking something. You know, the big dollar movies coming out of Hollywood, you watch them, and I hate to say it, a lot of them are boring. Just boring.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with a lot of that. There's a lot of movies made that, I am not going to give, I'm not going to go out and spend money to see it on a big screen when it winds up streaming at home. I may or may not look at some of them. Some of them I'm not interested in at all. I think that's part of it. And I think what you're touching on, it's the way I feel and a lot of indie filmmakers feel about it, is that some of the most interesting and out-of-the-box stories and original stories or a different telling of a story, you're going to get those in indie films because they can take the risk. In fact, by taking the risk and telling a different kind of story or telling a story, in a very different way, is what's going to get the attention. And you can do that in indie film, whereas they're not. It's funny because when they spend all that money on a feature film out of Hollywood, out of LA or New York or anywhere else, then many times they're much more conservative. They're not taking as big of a risk, in the kind of story they're going to tell or even how they're going to tell it. They have a lot of money. They can do things technically. They can get big names in it and stuff. But just because you have, good actors and big name actors, still doesn't mean that at the end of the day, you have a great story and a great film. It all depends on how they made it and what was the story they were telling in the first place. And I think that's part of the problem is they're not going out on a limb to give us, all the time. I mean, a lot of interesting new stories and the way they tell those stories. And then, many times they're retelling a story and not doing it as well as they did originally when they're doing so many remakes and sequels of films. And they're doing that simply because they already have a branded name of a franchise or a movie that they can roll back out there. And so it already has name recognition. But, that's, to me, and to you, that's not the only reason to, go and make that movie again and tell that story again. Unless you have something different to add to it, there's no reason to do that. But then sometimes they do actually do something different with it. But, it was good the first time around, and they didn't do as good a job tell it again. So that's part of that problem.
Well, a lot of the Hollywood movies just don't get your heart pumping, and a lot of the horror indie movies that they do, they kind of, I guess maybe, they take the risk, okay, of maybe making it more scary or more lifelike, more, the death, the sex, the rock and roll, the fancy cars, and all that stuff. They put it in, and the scenes, remind me a lot of times of the movies of the late 60s, early 70s, which weren't mellow. They were really kind of hard hitting. Nowadays, the movies, you see a lot of fake blood going around, but I don't know. It seems like it just doesn't have the impact. We got a caller on there. Who do we have, caller?
Hi, Gary. This is James. Hi, Ron. How are you guys doing?
We're doing good.
Hey, I got a question for Ron. With all the characters that he plays and with all the magician work and all the unique people in his life from day-to-day basis, does does it ever become blurred between the characters that he plays and real life? Does it ever get blurred sometimes?
It depends on the character. I mean, I'm not a method actor, so I'm not taking it all home with me. I can get very down, up and into a character and things like that. The one that hits closest to home, obviously, for me, is my character in Dark Relm. And even though because I'm not, it's very close to home for me. It's a little different, but I certainly that character is basically me on stage. But kind.
You're dropping out, Ron.
Is this any better?
Yeah, that's better now.
How's it? Okay. All right, good. Thank you. So I approach it kind of like they did for Prince and Purple Rain and Dark Relm, which is where they called him the Kid and they kind of refer to him loosely as someone else, even though it's clearly his movie and his performances and his music. And in Dark Relm, it's my performances and my illusions and everything mixed into that, storyline of the occult magic going on along the side of that. So that's the one that would be closest to me. But since I'm not, an actor per se, I'm not getting so into the character where I have it on 24/7, things like that.
Right.
But a lot of the characters, are kind of close to home simply because, you grow an affinity. Even if the character is rather dark, you have to find something good in it, something that you like about it, and something you can identify with in that character to bring it to the screen.
What character would you really want to play if you had a choice? There's several. Well, I love Nosferatu. I know they're making a Nosferatu movie now, but I did a photo series with celebrated dark art photographer Jim Sorkley, and we did some amazing Nosferatu photos, and everybody thought they were movie stills. So, and I love anything in the vampire genre I love, and I'd love to do vampire stuff. I'd love to do some horror comedy, but Nosferatu would be good. And then there's all kinds of great things on television and streaming now that I'd love to do something like that. I tell you, it's not really in the horror genre, but more in the sci-fi fantasy genre. But I'd love to do anything, including playing Doctor Who. I would love her. I would love her. My favorite movies. Now, my favorite vampire is Christopher Lee. What's yours, Ron, and what's yours, Gary?
Go ahead, Gary.
Well, I'm going to say Christopher Lee. Only because I love Hammer movies.
Now, tell the truth. It's because of those women in the low-cut dresses. Gary.
Well,
that's a good thing. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You got to love those Hammer films for that.
Well, that's what made the films popular, that especially when, I hate to say it, I remember when I was young and watching some of those Hammer movies, and I hate to say it, the lady laying in bed with her almost all of her breasts exposed and the vampire comes and bites her in the neck, things like that. I mean, or somewhere else, it kind of makes you glued into it. But they were, I think, one of the very first horror type production, studios that had come out. And they mixed the horror with the sex, thing, and that drew a big audience, especially at that time frame.
Yes. Well, I'm just glad you didn't say the Twilight series anyway, Gary, with the sparkles and sprinkles and glitter.
No.
And the warm, fuzzy orbs.
No sparkly vampires here. His eyes can be red like Christopher Lee's, but no sparkly vampires.
I think that really had a cult following, especially when the movie was filmed up. The show or movie was filmed up in Forks, Washington. But you know what? I watched it. I could not get into it. It was a movie or the show. I think there was a movie and the show, if I was right. It just. To me, maybe it wasn't designed for like teenagers. I don't know. It just
I think it was directed, for younger kids.
Yeah, it just didn't have no impact. How about you, Ron?
Well, I like different performances for different reasons. I am still a fan of Bela Lugosi because he was the first one to bring the first really rock star vampire. The first elegant vampire was when they brought him around and Bela performed, because he'd done it on stage and then he performed it in the movie. So I thought Bela had a good handle on it. But I'm with both of you guys. I think the most badass Dracula ever was Christopher Lee. And I love those Hammer films. I love the boobs and blood in those films. All of that stuff rocks. And he is the most badass, to this day, the most badass Dracula ever. on screen, Christopher Lee, without a doubt. But I also have to give a shout out to, and he only played him once, but Gary Oldman in playing Dracula, freaking amazing. Any dude who can